be at Powell's Books, doing a book signing and talk on whole earth discipline. Stewart Brand, founder and editor of the Whole Earth Catalog, among many other things. Longtime ecologist and activist. Stewart, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you here with us. And I found much to agree with in this book and much to disagree with. It's just a fascinating perspective. Here you are, the activist, the green guy, talking about on the one hand, the climate crisis is the crisis of our day. And I thought one of the notes that you made about that, one of the comments that you made about it was particularly pragmatic, was that most of the wealth of the world is on the seacoasts. And therefore, when the rich folks started getting affected by global climate change that raises sea levels, they're going to do something.
Yeah, there goes the real estate values.
Yeah, New York City's only a couple feet above sea level. So that seems a far more hopeful take on things.
I hadn't really noticed it till later that a lot of the poorest people in the world are very near to sea level in places like Bangladesh. And
yeah,
a lot of the richest people in the world are on the coasts of North America and Europe. Mm-hmm. And there's not a real danger of drowning unless you're on an island nation in the Pacific. You can walk away from the rate that the water will rise. Yeah. But you can't walk away from what happens to your real estate. And with that many people and that much political power where the sea is rising, I have a feeling that will be one of the things that sets in motion a lot of serious response.
I think the essence of your book was captured in your comment about Paul Ehrlich's debate with Julian Simon, or his bet. Julian Simon was considered by the environmental movement to be like the ultimate bad guy. He was professor at Columbia, as I recall, or wasn't it? Or,
sounds right. And then he was at Hudson Institute.
Right, and he died a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And I remember Dan, what's his name? He used to have on his website, you want to save the world or do you want to destroy the world? And if you click destroy the world, you'd go to Julian Simon's website. And
that's pretty good.
Yeah, it
like
was.
That.
But the bet was that Paul Ehrlich was saying that in the 70s that within 20 years or whatever the period of time was, that there was this basket of commodities that were going to be fabulously expensive because they were going to be so rare. And Julian Simon said, "No, we will think our way out of these problems." And Julian Simon won that bet, and that's Daniel Quinn is who I was thinking of, the author of Ishmael and all those other books. And that bet was. It's the essence of the optimism that's in your book, is that we can think our way out of this.
Well, it's one advantage. There's a lot of disadvantages to having 6.8 billion people and moving on toward 8 billion, maybe more. But one of the advantages, and Julian Simon was good on this, is there's that much more ingenuity. There's that many more people.
Well, sort of. I mean, it's somebody born in the slums of Bangladesh. Although you celebrate slums in your book.
I celebrate slums in the book because these are the most resourceful, ambitious, and genius people in the world. They took cell phones and turned them into cash. They figured out ways to make a cell phone an ATM machine, basically. They have swept across all of Africa, all of Asia, all of Latin America. There are now more cell phones in the developing world than in the developed world. And all of the cutting edge of the uses is happening out there. And that's pretty typical. So right. I think one of the things that the research turned up for me that happens is that cities grow very fast and create terrible problems. And that's happening more in the developing world than ever. They've grown, 3 times faster and 9 times bigger than we're used to in the developed world. Right. They create problems, and then they create solutions to the problems faster than they create the problems.
Right. I'm actually reading a book right now that was written in the 1870s about how bad New York City was.
Right.
And because it was a ghetto, basically. Most of the city was tenements, and you had 8, 10 families in an individual apartment, and it was terrible, and the cholera epidemics and everything else. And Louise and I worked in the Klong Toi slum in Thailand back many years ago. Uh-huh. And Dwang Prateep was working in this slum, and a fellow named Bernie from the BBC had just plopped down, and he came in to do a story about it and ended up living there. And they were fixing the sidewalks so that they weren't flammable, so that fires wouldn't spread. And they did a neighborhood alert because the corporations that owned the land that they were squatting on would, from time to time, hire organized criminals to come in and burn them out.
Oh, charming.
And they put together a garbage collection service for the slum. I mean, there's over 1,872 is my recollection of the number of named individual slums in Bangkok. And you point out in your book that in Thailand, most of the people in the slums have color TV, and that's something that Louise and I remember. Color TV is in phony Jordache jeans, hanging on the lines, and yet they didn't have running water, and they were standing on stilts over polluted water. So, most of them worked. Most of the people in the Klong Toi slum worked. They were the maids in the hotels. They were the tuk-tuk drivers. They were and you talk about that as an incubator. And the other point that I thought was fascinating in the book, and that I make in my book Threshold, is that the empowerment of women through coming into the cities has driven is probably going to be the big break on population, and that when women are living in the countryside, children are an asset. When they live in the city, they become a liability. Riff on that a little.
They become a liability to a certain point. Basically, women are liberated by moving from the village into the city, and what they do with that liberation is decide whether or not they want to stay with the guy they're with. Some don't. And then they decide to have basically fewer, higher quality children, which means that having just one or two, they can bear down on getting good education for them. Right. And you may have encountered in the slum you were working in that people will pool their tiny amounts of money, hire a few local teachers, some families will get together, start a little private school, completely off the books, informal economy kind of thing, and pretty good school.
Well, that's what Dwayne Prateep did. In fact, she got a $5,000 grant from the Rockefeller Foundation as a consequence of what she was doing. She got this international recognition, and that was the thing that brought the Klong Toi slum to our attention. Was, they were a model for other slums.
One of the things I've found in the research for this book is how extremely important the Rockefeller Foundation has been in damn near all the good things you can find, and stepping right up and indeed exceeding the quantity, and in some cases the quality, is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They're in the thick of the genetic engineered food crops for the developing world, disease control in the developing world, all this kind of stuff. It's pretty impressive.
We're talking with Stewart Brand. His new book, Whole Earth Discipline, an eco-pragmatist manifesto, the founder and editor of the Whole Earth Catalog. Stewart, you, in your book, unabashedly promote nuclear power. Now, granted, you talk about micro-nuclear plants, small nuclear plants. We're talking with Stewart Brand. Amory Lovins has been pushing back pretty aggressively, saying, wait a minute, you quoted my downside information, but then you didn't quote the footnotes kind of thing. Have you changed your mind from what you wrote in the book?
I'm glad Amory is out there on Griscom. He's got a long, as usual, riposte. And since a large part of my chapter is rebuttal to Amory Lovins, I think it's perfectly reasonable that he would have a counter to it. What's especially nice is the 100 or so comments that follow are other people who know a lot about nuclear, mostly pro, some con, who are getting down into the gritty details that Amory likes to dwell among. And so the debate is very good there. Yeah. And I think there's some change that will happen as Amory reads the rest of the book. He was responding just to the one chapter out of 9 that was about nuclear in the book.
Yeah, this is very much a big picture book, and something that's going to cause, I think, a lot of environmentalists, a lot of progressives to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe I need to think a little bit more about this, or to push back, as Amory Lovins is doing. Yep. So, Stewart Brand, founder and editor of the Whole Earth Catalog, his new book, Whole Earth Discipline, an Eco-Pragmatist Manifesto. And if you're in Portland tonight, he'll be at Howell's Books down on Burnside at 7:30. Don't miss Stewart then. Thank you. Thank you, Stewart.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.